really like writing flawed characters, like deeply flawed characters, because I think that's so exciting for me to like go into like what makes this person fucked up, or like what are their ups and downs, what are their like what's what is so deeply human, what's so deeply flawed, what is so even like I think that's what's exciting is like getting to know a character for in a way that you would know someone like.
So this afternoon, I'm speaking to Anushka Mehrotra. You were the lead writer for an extremely successful Amazon Prime web series called the Mumbai Diaries, which was such a big hit here. And you also won the Screenwriter Award and a Filmfare Award for this series that you wrote. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being on this podcast with me.
Thank you for having me.
I do want to point out that, you are firstly extremely young. And by your own admission, people in the industry spend years trying to achieve what you have. And even though you achieved it relatively faster, obviously it wasn't like easy or handed to you. And like what do you attribute this success to?
I think there are a lot of factors involved. I do think luck plays a role in it, because I do think that there are people who, it's just the way the industry works. Sometimes you're working on a show for years and it gets paused at, you even sometimes I finish the writing of something and then I don't know what's happened to it. Like either they've pushed the production, or the director's working on something else, or the actor they had in mind is not available. So there's so many factors that play into getting something made like this. So I do think luck is a big part of it.
You sound like a romantic.
Well, I think I'm a bit of a realist in that sense. I don't know about romantic, but I think that there's so much, like I said, there's so many various factors that go into it, and I'm also like, my father's an artist. So when I came into the creative field, I was told that it would have a lot of ups and downs. And so I was very prepared to face a lot of rejection and face a lot of ups and downs. And I think a lot of people in my creative writing classes in college and stuff who were way more skilled and more talented than me, maybe, I think they're all doing other stuff. They're not doing writing related stuff. And I do maybe think that part of it is they weren't aware of how much ups and downs, and like a couple of rejections in, they feel like, okay, I don't know how many more I can take of this, maybe I should just look for a different career option. And so I think it's a lot of different factors. I think you being aware of what it takes to make it in this industry, and knowing that even once you're successful, that doesn't mean that, like, I won an award for this show, that doesn't mean I'm going to get the next show. It doesn't mean the next show is going to come out in time. It doesn't mean the next show is going to win an award. It doesn't mean I'm going to get work consistently always. Like, COVID hit. I mean, the show came out in COVID. I think for a lot of people, that was such a tumultuous period of time. You don't know. Sales are going up. Like, sales for art went down in COVID, but there was a lot more stuff coming out in the TV industry, because writing I was getting more jobs in COVID while other people were getting less. It's just being in a creative field it involves so many ups and downs in general.
And how did you find yourself writing for web series specifically?
Well, I always loved long form storytelling. Like, I always thought I would write a novel. That was kind of the thing. So, and like, I love films, but because I think films tend to be a little more plot based, because you have like, it's gonna get over in 2 hours, give or take. And then, you don't have a lot of space to kind of evolve with the character, like see the characters evolve in the same degree that you can see them evolve in a web series. And I really like that. That's my favorite thing about it, like seeing a character and, even having them go on, like, I really like redemption or corruption arcs, because you see a character go from a point and see what it takes to make them someone completely different, which I think is really nice. So I always enjoyed that about shows. And when I moved back to India after working in the US, Indian web series were just starting to take off. Its Sacred Games came out while I was in my first few months of my job, so it was that period of time where Indian web series were just starting to become a thing.
Right.
And it was really beneficial for me because normally there's a hierarchical structure in Bollywood. With film, there's always, you have to spend so many years being like an assistant writer and maybe sometimes even a researcher, then an assistant writer. Then, there were those systems in place which all kind of went out the window because web series was new. No one knew like really what the structure was, and they were just starting to like play around with the ideas of writers' rooms and all that kind of stuff. So that was like, I think luck played a role in it that I came in at that time and I got to, be a part of it. And I got to actually write my first web series. I think it would have taken me much longer to be a proper, like, to write the screenplay and story of a web series if I had come in at a different time, and because I came in at that time, I got that opportunity and I got to actually write it. And it is genuinely luck that it got made and got released and everything.
And tell me about the writer's room. What is that experience like? Because it is such a collaborative project, right? And you're working with so many different people, so much creative input.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you felt during that time and what you liked about it, and even maybe some of the things that you found didn't work for you.
It was definitely a major learning curve because I was so used to writing being such a isolated experience. It was just me and my computer and my ideas and my characters, and this thing just worked the way. And I got feedback only when I specifically requested it. Like, you do have a little bit of that, like in my college, in creative writing classes, you'd all sit in a room and people would read your story and give their feedback. But ultimately, it was your choice what you take and everything. Suddenly, it was like, here you're with a bunch of other people, all of whose ideas are like equally good, or maybe you don't like it, but they believe in it as much as you believe in your ideas. And then there's someone else taking, like the director's taking a call, the producers are taking a call. You're getting feedback from so many different places. It was so overwhelming to have to deal with that.
I can imagine, yeah.
But it's also really helpful because I think, I know some people are faster writers. I'm not a very fast writer in that sense. So it does help. Like, how do you get so many ideas so fast to put out a show in such a short period of time? And I think the only way to do it is to do it in a writer's room, right? You have all these people and they're all giving ideas and you're all working together to solve the problems and having a discussion. You always have a board to bounce ideas off of. And I think there's a lot. And you get so many different ideas that you would have never come up with when you're just sitting alone in your room. So there's both the good and the bad. But I do think for sure, like for a web series, the writer's room setup is the best way of going about it because you're all like coming together, coming up with ideas, dividing the work, writing it out, And sure, sometimes it's frustrating because you will do something and they'll change it and then you'll be like, why? I loved that line.
Yeah.
But it always helps when there's like more than two also. There's like a third person to like tie break and it works out well.
And like you were alluding to, it is a personal process. And there is the feeling of like, oh, I loved that line or I loved this particular arc, and then not having that, be part of the grander picture. And how do you deal with, just that back and forth or that dance of just constantly putting yourself out there and then meeting with, feedback and positive things as well, but also at the same time, like negative feedback. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think you're going to get positive and negative feedback regardless, even when it's your own thing, like even in creative writing class. I mean, I think there's a little bit of, you take it harder when it's your own ideas and your own thing. When it's, I think in a web series space, you kind of think of it as our project a little bit. And so that kind of, it still feels personal, but it still feels like this is something that we've all made together and people know that you've all made it together.
Which is really nice. Yeah. And so really different from the, like, Bollywood or Hollywood where there is like a personal ownership to everything and it's like, this is mine. And so are you saying that there is less of like conflated egos and more of a collaborated spirit within the web series space?
I can't speak for other people, but I think that's how I have learned to deal with it. That I think of it as a more collaborative thing, as opposed to like if it was my like I'd written a novel, I know that whoever reads the novel is gonna judge me based on the novel. Like, you know, there's that. It's my ideas, it's my novel, it's out there, and of course there's an editor who worked on it and a whole team in the publishing thing, but it's your name that it's under. Here it's like I'm one of the writers, but I know that there are other people involved. There's a director taking calls, a producer taking calls, there are actors who are bringing their own thing to the role. So you can't take it so personally. It is a collaborative thing, and it is like something that so everyone has come together to work on. And so sometimes you just gotta let it go. Like maybe, and sometimes you also don't see certain things. Like while you're writing it, you're like, you know, maybe it's a casting choice, maybe it's a, you know, a thing that you can't see but the director can see. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't agree with that, but then when you see the final product, you're like, oh, okay, now I see what, you know, like
What the vision was.
what the vision was. You know, sometimes it's about letting go at some point and being like, okay, let's see, you know, maybe it might not always turn out better, but ultimately it is a group thing. It's a group project, you know, it's not yours. You can't be so like, you know, if you say your piece and then step back, that kind of thing. That's how I've learned how to deal with it, at least, because I think that was something I was struggling with a lot, where I was feeling really strongly about something and these guys were like, no. And then you just gotta learn to be like, okay, I've said what I need to say and I can't do any more after this, you know.
And from what you're saying, it also sounds like things unfold as time goes. You know, you might have a direction or a vision in mind, and then organically things change.
Yeah.
Which lends itself to the story so much, right? And so just what I'm hearing is like now you're able to be open to the changes and the...
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely still a learning. Like, I've only have one show out so far, but it's even like within the writing room, there's this, but there's also like, you know, when to read a show in the script form and then see it on TV, like sometimes the performance makes such a big difference. Like I could feel one way about this character on paper, and then I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, this feels like a different person. Like,
Can you give me an example?
well, no, just that sometimes, like, you know, you intend the line to be said in a certain way, but the actor has brought some other emotion to it. So suddenly you're feeling differently. And, you know, it's kind of a little bit like, you know, when you read a book and then you watch the movie adaptation of it, you're like, that's not how I imagined it. Oh, that's kind of cool. That's neat how they did it. It does feel like that, despite the fact that, like, I know every line they're going to say. But it still has a different feeling, because suddenly you're seeing... like visually it's different from what was in your head, and it's always like, unless you're a writer director who's like
Seeing everything.
yeah
With like...
for me as a writer, like I'm like, oh, imagine this one way and suddenly it's this other way, and just like it's such a strange experience to see that, like,
Yeah.
but it's very cool also, like
It sounds really cool. And you also, you know, got a lot of responsibility being the lead writer for this show. And what do you attribute that to? How do you feel like you know, were able to kind of get the attention and the I guess like people like someone must have trusted you with this, right? So what do you attribute that to?
I think I was pretty proactive in terms of doing a lot of the work that they were giving. You know, I think I was kind of like going a little above and beyond, because like it was sometimes it was just like, oh, do this small thing, and then I was like, you know, I was like, okay, but it's based on this book, so let me read this book and let me mark every instance of, you know, like I remember I was assisting on this project and it was based on a book series, and while reading the book I was like, okay, let me just mark every like important, you know, whatever character scene with this kind of, you know, I don't know, I think I was just very enthusiastic and I was really kind of going above and beyond on a lot of the work they gave me. So I think they felt like they could give me more responsibility, and that kind of sort of built up from there, where I think they did feel at one point that I was able to take on the writing of the show and do and definitely this show in particular, while I was writing it, they were still looking for other, like it was just me and one of the directors writing it at that point. They were looking for another like more senior writer, to join the project at that time. And for a while, I was working on it thinking a senior writer is going to come in and, all like completely
Take
rewrite this
over.
stuff. Yeah. But then they actually liked how it was. So then they like stop up eventually. Like, so again, that's also why I feel that there's an element of luck at play, because they didn't find a senior writer to take over that early enough. And by that point, I'd written enough. Me and the other writers had written enough of it that
Right.
they felt like, okay, this is solid. This actually could work, and we don't need to bring in someone with more experience in that sense. Again, and also the two directors had a lot of experience. Me and the other writer didn't. This was our first show, but I think the collaboration just worked out really well.
That's always nice when you can collaborate well with the people that you're working with. But I mean, at the same time, it sounds like you inspired that confidence within them with your writing and with the work you did. And what do you feel was like the biggest learning for you?
Well, I think one of the things was this, learning how to work with other people in the writing space. Another thing was like thinking visually, because I don't think, for me, it's like novels can be very introspective and can be very much about the character's thoughts, or like, but that doesn't like, you can write a whole paragraph in the screenplay about this is what the character thinks, but how does it come across on the screen? And sure, that's gonna be up to the director and the actors also, but I have to be able to show it in a way that's very visual. And like I remember one of the directors, Nikhil Gonzalez, when we were writing this, he would keep pointing out like, how would I see that on screen? Like the characters to do something, like, and it is a bit of the show don't tell thing, but in prose it's a little different, because you are following a character and you can go into their head and you can bring about, but on a screenplay you have to make the character's actions tell you so much, and that has to. So like, and even not just that, but like even thinking like they're sitting at a table and they're having a conversation. He's like, this is going to be so boring to watch. Like, set it in a place that's interesting. Set it in and let them do an activity. Let them do whatever. Like suddenly thinking of it like that was, because I'm not a very like visual writer in that sense. Like a lot of times I'll kind of vaguely know how the characters look, but it's not as, like, my brain doesn't work in that very visual kind of way. So it was definitely, that was a big learning curve for me to, like, have to try and think of it in a more visual sense. Like, how is it going to look on screen at all times? And how is this thing going to come across from the actions on screen? And why is this scene? And I noticed that in movies more too. Like, like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how would I make this scene more interesting to watch? Because if it's just like cut character faces back and forth, I'm like, oh my God, this is so dull. Like, how would I have, how could I take this scene and make it more visually interesting to watch, kind of thing.
That's interesting. And I think that's like such a specific thing to learn also as a writer, like that might only come with experience as well, right? Like, because you now know what to look for and what to avoid, and
that's
all of those things.
And that's one of the things that I read a lot of screenplays to learn how to write screenplays. But it took this director pointing this out to me that, see, you're not thinking of this in a visual way, for me to like realize that, oh my God, that's what is like messing that scene up. That's one of those things that you need someone with experience to kind of come in and point these things out to you.
Yeah. What do you think it is that, sets you apart from other writers, seeing as you have worked with a few now and, you've been in the writer's room? Like, what do you think is the thing that makes your vision or your writing style different?
I don't know, actually. I don't know I don't think I can make a statement as this is what makes me different from other writers, because I think everyone has a different way of working, and every writer is different in that sense. I think one thing is that though I'm in the position where I'm like privileged enough to be able to not take on jobs that I don't believe in or don't kind of totally agree with the idea. Like, I think there's some people who kind of have to just they're not in a position where they can afford to turn down anything. And I think I'm at the position where I can afford to fight back for a vision that I believe in, because I'm like, for me, the worst is that I don't get this project.
Right.
And that's not the end of the world in that sense, because I feel like I'll be able to, I'll survive,
Yeah, you'll be okay.
But so I'm definitely like, I'm more open to kind of sharing, like putting it out there, like what I feel about a certain thing. And even sometimes with like very well respected people in the field, even if they say something and I don't agree with it, I will put my point across and say I don't agree with this and I don't think so, and I'll put my thing. And I do think I'm more, because of the position I'm in, where like worst case scenario I don't get the job, I know that, and or worst case scenario they ignore me, they don't listen to my thing. But I think I feel like I do put that out there a lot more than like, that's why I don't want to say like compared to other writers. It's just something that I think that maybe someone who's a little bit new in the field doesn't do as often. And that's something that I feel like if I'm really strongly believe in, like, this is not, I don't like how this is playing out, or I don't like what this is saying or how this is coming across, I will be like very blatant about that, and very like, I will be very explicit about the fact that I don't like it, or I don't like how it's playing out. And like,
right. And do you think when you started out, you would have had the same confidence and the same kind of mindset, or do you feel like it's something that's come with experience and, naturally the validation?
I do think it was a little bit there even when I was starting out, to be fair. Like I said, I think I am from, like, I have the support of my family and everything, where I'm in that position where I'm like, okay, fine, if I can afford to be a little, like, if they, like, I'd rather work with someone who doesn't mind being challenged. So even in college, I was like very much challenging the teachers, in class, I was that annoying person. So I was like, when they had given me, like, when I started off at this company, they give me a script to read, and I came back with like, I don't like this, I don't like this. Like, I mean, obviously I was being a little diplomatic. I said, I like this, I like this, but also I don't like this and I don't like this. And I was just like, I'm not going to work with someone who doesn't, like, I'm not like ChatGPT. I'm not just going to do I'm not going to write just what people want me to write. And I'm going to push back and point out what I don't like and what I think is ineffective from my point of view. And if they disagree, I'm happy to have that conversation, but I'm not going to like be quiet just because this person has years of experience and I don't. That's kind of the way I was a little bit feeling about it. And like I said, again, I know, like, I knew that if I didn't get that job, I would still be okay. And that's why I'm in a privileged position that I could afford to push buttons a little bit in that sense.
Sure.
But it worked out in my favor, because a lot of people do like being challenged, especially in the creative field, Not everyone. Not everyone. Definitely not. But there are a lot of people that I've worked with enjoy seeing things from a different point of view, and having that, like, having someone see things in a different way from them and being like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that we can think of, And obviously not everything I said was right either, but for me, I'm like, I'll say my piece, and if they don't agree with me, they can give me their reason, and then, but for me, that conversation is so important to the creative process. Like, it's really important. I can't work with someone who's just like, no, this won't work.
Right.
Like, tell me why it doesn't work. Like, I have to know why it doesn't work so that I won't suggest it next time. But otherwise, I'm going to keep thinking you're
going to keep popping up with your suggestions.
Unless you tell me, like, or like, if you're not someone who's open to taking criticism, then how are you open to becoming better? Like,
absolutely.
It's a two-way thing.
Right. And I think, as people have more experience, they realize that other people respond well when you share your true opinion or thought process. It makes you kind of seem like you know what you're talking about as well, right? And I do want to know about your internal process as well, because everyone has such a different style of working. And so what would you say is yours?
Like, in terms of like coming up, writing a show?
In terms of writing in general, yeah.
I think for me, like I've mentioned before, like, characters are really what excites me about it. So a lot of the time it's, yeah, of course you have to come up with the scenario, but it's about coming up with the basic scenario and then coming up with the characters and then how the characters react in that scenario. So you kind of know generally what's going to happen in the plot. But a lot of the decisions are about figuring out what would this character do in this moment, or like it's basically the characters and the relationships are what's really exciting to me. So for me, it kind of starts like inside out. Like it starts with the character, and then now they're in this position. How would they react to this? What would this character do? And of course, sometimes in which shows, like for example, an adaptation. If I'm adapting a book, that's a little bit different way of dealing with it, because if I'm adapting a book or another show or something like that, I have to work within I know what the plot is. Even if I'm making my own version of the character, the plot has to play out in a certain way. And so sometimes you have to tweak the character based on the plot, and sometimes you tweak the plot based on the character. But for me, I do think that what's really exciting is the characters, and so I always try and flesh out the characters first, and then kind of either, tweak the plot based on that, or the other way around. Like if this has to happen in the plot, then I'm like, it has to make sense for this character to do a certain thing, and then to build the character around that. So that's then it's generally but like really truly the characters and the relationships are what like excites me most about the whole process. So I always start from there and then build off that.
What do you think it is that draws you towards the human condition and relationship?
That's a very complex question, I think. I don't know what it is. I think it's just that is something that, you don't... I think fiction is a way of learning people in a deeper manner than sometimes you... Like, you meet someone at a party or something and you only get to know a surface level.
Yeah, who they want you to get to know at that point.
And I think fiction is a way of kind of seeing a person in their entirety. And that's why I really like... Especially, I really like writing flawed characters, like deeply flawed characters, because I think that's so exciting for me to like go into like what makes this person fucked up. Or like what are their ups and downs? What are their like what is so deeply human, what's so deeply flawed, what is so even, like I think that's what's exciting is like getting to know a character for in a way that you would know someone like because it's there are very few relationships in your life that you're so intimate with them that like all the details about them, like there's, and I think that's what's fun about fiction is you get to like learn about so many different people in all their like nuances and all their complexities, and that's what's really fun about it, and getting to even come up with that for different characters and learn about, and there's so much empathy involved also. It's like sometimes you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone, and try and figure out how does their brain work and how does, and it's someone who's so completely different from you and has such a different experience, and like putting yourself in there and being like, how would this work and how would I respond to this and how would I, like it's a very fun process.
Is there any character that you have written or, that you've read about fictional that you resonate with like very deeply?
I think there's not one I don't put like, I think I spread elements of myself and people I know like throughout different characters. I'm not like, I don't want to put all my qualities into one character or someone else's qualities into one character. I think for me it's about like picking and choosing elements of myself, of people I know, of my friends, of people I've met into different characters. And so like certain characters will have this person's quirk and certain characters will have this person's, way of talking. And, like that's what's also, I think, you're making like a little Frankenstein's monster out of people you've met and characters.
I like that. I like that. I like that parallel. It's like, I'm just out here building a human with like, I'll take your flaw.
Exactly. And it's also like even with fictional characters that you relate to in so much that I think a lot of the characters I relate to most are like nothing like me. It's just that certain qualities of them.
Give me an example.
Really, gosh, I like really random obscure characters.
That's okay, for sure. That's why Google exists.
Well, there's a book series called the Raven Cycle series, and there's a character in that called Adam, he's like a poor kid from this. He's being abused by his dad. He works 3 jobs, and his biggest goal in life is to like get out of his house and go to Harvard. And it's nothing like me. Like none of those are like like anything to do with me. But for some reason, he's so deeply human, and he's got these like he's very stubborn, and he's very conflicted in his head, and he's very like, he's like stubborn to a fault almost. And like certain qualities like that make him so like human and so flawed and everything that I like really resonated so much. I felt like this feels like a human being. When I was reading that book, I was like so invested in that character's journey because he felt so real, because there were so many contradictions about him, so many like flaws and things, and like all the elements coming together. Like he's this kind of, I don't know, I think that book series does a good job of writing characters because they write it in such a way that it's so much also like it deals with multiple point of view, and you see how different characters see the same character as well. Like,
oh, I love that.
So one character is in love with him, so that the narration is completely different from the character that sees his flaws much more clearly. And so it's like you're getting also, it really feels so human because you're also seeing this character from different people's point of view, and that's what's really exciting about it. And I think that's one of the books that I really resonate with the characters a lot, just because of how human and how like flawed and complex and everything they are. Like they're enduring, but they're also like really messed up, and like all these kind of things, which I very much enjoy.
And I've noticed that characters that get portrayed on screen have gone from, especially in India, have gone from sort of one-dimensional, good or bad, like you have ethics and values, or you're just this bigra hua, human being.
Yeah.
And like that resonated with people at that time. But today what we're seeing is that actually we want to see people who are at kind of war with themselves on so many levels. And like you said, that, that there's so much conflict, and that comes through like internal conflict more than, as much as external.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what do you attribute that change to in terms of what people like to see in their characters and on screen?
Well, I think like you said, I think there are certain things that you go to when you want, like I think children's media, for example, is very, in that sense, black and white, right? There's the good guys and there's the bad guys, and if I want that narrative, I will go and watch something like that. But I think it's that there's so much of like, it's kind of like, the way people are talking about representation, right? Like sure, there are, like in Indians in Western media were always shown to be like shop owners and taxi drivers and everything. And that's not to say that there aren't shop owners and taxi drivers who are Indian who work in America, but there's also Indians who do 100 other jobs in America. And the whole point is that we're not going to stop, like no one's saying stop showing Indians who are taxi drivers in American stuff. It's like show more of that. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like there are people who want to see black and white narratives, but there are people who also want to see something completely different, something very nuanced and complex. And for a long time, there was only more black and white narratives. And now people are like, can we diversify? Like no one's going to stop making good guy, bad guy narratives, But there are people who want to see like, because as you grow up also you learn that like mistakes don't make you a bad person, right? And you want to see that reflected on the screen. You want to see like, I want to see a good guy make mistakes and do the wrong thing and mess up, but also still be the good guy. You want to see, and that's what makes it human. That's what makes it feel realistic.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. You want to see good people mess up as well. Like there's no, like absolute right or wrong.
And I think the whole point of it is like having media that for everyone, and having the kind of narratives that everyone can enjoy. Like, sure, there are a lot of romance movies for people who like romance. What about people who don't like watching romance? You have to diversify. You have to. The whole point is that now more and more people are able to put out content also. Like, with there's so many different types of media and like podcasts and games and on you can write a story online and put it out there for the world to read, and so that's why more than ever, like, you see also how much people want different kinds of narratives.
Yeah, I know. People are a bit of a segue, but people are advertising their books on Instagram, and for some reason my algorithm keeps showing me like these erotic novels. What am I liking? What am I liking? What is it like? They're not bad though, if you want to give them. But yeah,
They're for everyone.
so much content. And no, I really liked your answer, and it was really like it's made me think of so much. And as you progress in your career now, what kind of genres or themes would you like to explore? Like, do you have something in mind?
Gosh, it's so cool. I do want to go. I mean, I really like fantasy as a genre, and I do think that Indian fantasy has been very mythology focused.
Right.
I do think that's something I would love to, try my hand at if ever. Like, because I think that like Game of Thrones was so big here. Why can't we have an Indian inspired fantasy series? That's something that I think is really lacking, and that would be really fun to work on, and do something that's Indian fantasy but not related to the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the gods. Just something totally different, just different world, different thing, that sort of thing. And I do also like, I don't know, I think I'm very like, I like a lot of different genres, so I'd love to like try, like, even animation. I think there's such a big scope to do such cool stuff with animation. Like Across the Spider-Verse is just showing you how you can take the same characters, that and put them in something that's really different and unique, and and I think even like Pixar movies, for example, there's that intrinsic heart in them, but they're doing these really, really different fun concepts, and that's just something like, so I like children's media is also something I'd love to or like animation, not necessarily children's animation even, but like animation is something I think would be fun to work on. I don't know, I don't like to I think I'm still new in the industry. I don't have one particular, there are like 10 different things I'm
You want to experiment with everything.
I want to really try different things.
Awesome. And what do you have like a favorite screenwriter or author?
I like a lot of different ones. I mean, I think like I do always like Nolan stuff. That's always something that's, I mean, at least the like the Prestige, Inception, all those, I was like really love that kind of those kind of narratives that he comes up with. I really like Edgar Wright as a director. He has again very unique narratives, but I don't like that. I generally don't like follow one person's whole thing. Like I Phoebe Wallabridge is great. I love her sense of comedy, but like again, it's one of those things that like I'll get into it because of one thing that I really like.
Yeah.
And that's same with like it's hard for me to like say one favorite author because I like really like one thing by them, but then I'm not generally like I'll go and read every single thing they've ever written. Like I'll be like I really like that one series. Like there's a fantasy heist series called Six of Crows. So I say I really love that author, but that's kind of really like the only thing I've read a little bit of her other stuff, but that's really the only thing I've read of hers. So it's like it's a little hard for me to say like, oh, I love this author without like consuming the entire body of work in that sense.
Yeah. Which I think is maybe like a reflection again of just, the access that we have to different creators. It's like we can really pick and choose, and there's no like one favorite, and then you just like are obsessed with everything that they've done?
Oh, Agatha Christie. I read everything she's written.
There we go. We got an answer. Okay. That's pretty cool. And I just want to say, like, for the things that you have achieved so far, like you're very like, do you play it down, like your achievements?
I don't know. I think I'm like, I feel, I honestly, like winning the Filmfare, it's really only changed how my friends talk about me to other people. I really think that's the biggest change. Like, it's just my friends will be like, "Did you know she won a Filmfare?" And that's
they're like bragging on your behalf.
Yeah, the same with my parents going on, "Did you know she won a Filmfare?" Like, that's the biggest change. Honestly, like, I don't think it's made that much of a difference within the industry. I think having a show out there made a big difference. Like,
right,
people, when you have a show that's come out and people have watched it, that, like, in the industry, suddenly people are like, "Oh, you wrote that show. Oh, I liked that show," and I get that feeling also. Like, if I heard someone worked on a show I liked, I'm like, "Oh, wow, we worked on that show. I loved that show," So it's more that. It's less the awards, I don't think, has really changed that much. So I don't know, downplaying it. I just don't think it's like, it's really, I don't feel any different after it,
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Because you did say that, it hasn't really affected the kind of work that you do, or even the work coming your way, which I find really interesting, because it's kind of like validation, right, within the industry, which is what so many people kind of measure as success. Like, you've made it, but you don't feel like that is truly reflective of the work that you get to pick and choose. And
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just my experience or whether I'm, it's something. But I think that's why I think people are more impressed by the fact that, like, they post, like, if they watched the show and they made their own opinion about it and they liked it. I think there's way more people being impressed by that if they're like, "Oh, I liked that show and you wrote it." There's so much more, they have more respect for you then than if you're like, "Oh, I wanted some award." Like, they're like, "Okay, you could have won an award, but I could have not liked that." So,
fair. You're more focused on the opinion, like the public opinion of, what's been, like, people just kind of saying that they like it.
Yeah, I do think that, I mean, for me, the award was a big deal. Obviously, I think it's great, but I don't like that. I don't think it's about I don't know. The public opinion thing is, people are, there's never one
consensus,
right? Yeah. If you go on Twitter and look up the name of the show, there's like so many people trashing it as well. It's just one of those things. I don't feel like, I think it's I don't know. It's like a hard question.
Fair. I actually, I asked you a while ago what made you want to get into writing, and I'm going to ask that now because I really like that story. So can you share a little bit about what drew you to writing and how you got into it?
Well, so I got into, like, reading in a big way when I was like 6 years old, but I didn't really know that was a job you could have. I guess no one tells you that people do this as a job. You're just like, I get books and I'm reading them and I'm having fun. And then when I was like in third standard, during the summer break, the teacher was like, "Anushka's handwriting is terrible. Please ask her to," like, she told my mom, "Please ask her to keep a diary of like everything that you're doing every day." And I still have this diary, by the way. And I was so bored writing diary entries. Like, I would start writing them and then like halfway through I would just draw a line and like draw at the bottom because because I was so bored doing the diary entry stuff. So then I think, I don't know if it was like someone's idea or whether I just decided to do it, but I was like, if it was just about if I just have to like work on my handwriting, why don't I write stories instead of this diary thing? So I started writing stories in that book. And then suddenly you can see like the diary entries were like 4 lines and the stories were like pages and pages of me like writing the story. And I was like, oh, I like this so much. Like, I'm having so much fun. And then I know that write is something you can do for a job. So I was like, this is great. I want to be a writer.
At 8 years old, you're like, I have found my calling.
Exactly.
Nice.
It's great. I want to never stop doing
Have you thanked that teacher? Just been like, hey, thanks for the, writing exercise and homework.
I don't know if I've expressed, but I mean, she was always one of my favorite teachers. So
That's
I think
sweet.
she knew that.
Yeah.
When I went on vacation, I would like bring her back. I was so wanted to like pick up like keychains and stuff for her.
Oh, that's really cute. Thank you for sharing, and thank you so much for your time. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.